Welcome to CSS Breakdown, book by book, Season 08, Episode 02, where we dive into Chapter 2, War, of Andrew J. Williams, Amelia Hadfield, and J. Simon Rofe's International History and International Relations, asking a question as old as conflict itself. Has war truly changed its nature, or are we perpetually relearning old lessons? That's a fundamental question, isn't it? And our mission in this deep dive is, well, to unpack the fascinating paradox at the heart of understanding conflict. We're going to dig into the sources you shared to see what historians and international relations scholars have to say about this enduring debate.
Indeed, and it's a central question, really. Has war fundamentally transformed, especially, since the Industrial Revolution and with technology just accelerating, or does it largely retain its core nature? It's a huge debate in international history and relations. Some argue it's even postmodern now, while others, like the military theorist Liddell Hart, famously argued. Well, he said the idea, every war has been different from the last, is the delusion of those who know no history. Strong words.
That definitely sets up a powerful tension right from the start. As we explore the material you've provided, it challenges us, and you listening, to consider a few critical ideas. How much do individual leaders, those often termed great men, or perhaps rarely women, truly shape events versus the larger structures they operate within? And what is the actual experience of war like, both for individuals, down on the ground, and for whole societies?
And that key question, do wars ever truly end? Not just when the fighting stops, but does the unfinished business linger?
Exactly. It's all about trying to get to the persistent heart of conflict. So let's begin by examining what your sources tell us feels. Well, unchanging about war. The study of international relations at its core constantly grapples with these foundational questions. What is war? What causes it? Can we prevent it? How do we limit its effects? Yet, as a scholar Stephen Van Evera points out in your material, scholars have made scant progress on these really fundamental problems. Why do you think that is based on the sources?
Well, the sources suggest is partly because many underlying causes, like basic human instinct perhaps, or deeply embedded economic systems, they're just not easily manipulated or changed. This leads to a certain kind of realist pessimism you see in the field. The idea that war is, in some sense, inevitable because of immutable human nature.
A grim outlook.
It can be. And one powerful insight that emerges from studying the history of war is its consistent, terrible nature. The targeting of non-combatants, the gratuitous torment of vanquished foes. This is not a new feature of modern conflict. It's been there a long, long time.
So not just a 20th century invention, then?
Absolutely not. Thucydides, for instance, he details massacres way back in the Peloponnesian Wars in ancient Greece. Civilians were primary victims in the English Civil War and the 30 Years' War. Just horrific. Routine rape and torture, vividly depicted in the novel Simplicissimus. And even today, the sources mention atrocities against children, like up to 1,500 having limbs hacked off in some African conflicts. It echoes these historical horrors. The takeaway is, human brutality in conflict, while shocking, is tragically not new.
And yet, as your sources also reveal, there's this powerful counterpoint to the consistent horror. What do they tell us about the human draw to conflict? The elements of glory and excitement that seem to defy its brutal reality.
It's a profound paradox, isn't it? Despite the horror, the glory and excitement associated with war remain incredibly strong tropes globally. Think about the soldiers of 1914 marching off to battle in Europe, singing, flowers thrown at them. Many, even those later decorated for bravery, like the French novelist Louis-Ferdinand Céline, they deeply felt this initial allure.
A sense of purpose, maybe?
Exactly. War is also closely linked with forging common purpose, building nations, driving commerce, accelerating technology. It acts as a major vector for profound societal change. What's truly insightful from your sources is this consensus among thinkers and practitioners of war over the last couple of centuries on a few key points. First, the language of war and peace are intimately intertwined.
Right.
And war itself is accepted as a learned social activity. That's crucial. It implies we simply must understand its social and cultural context.
We can't just look at the battles.
No. Second, history can indeed be a valuable guide, but it demands extreme care in its interpretation. As W.B. Galli suggests, history provides necessary contexts for thinking about war and allows us to participate in what he calls a time-transcending dialogue.
That concept of a time-transcending dialogue is compelling. Let's delve into it by looking at ancient warfare. Western thinkers have always been fascinated by this period, especially the wars of ancient Greece and Rome. The relevance of Greek military tactics, for example, is still explored today.
Oh, absolutely. And a prime example, A truly celebrated paradox from ancient times is that Latin phrase, si vis pacem para bellum.
If you want peace, prepare for war.
Precisely. It encapsulates a classic definition of raison d'etat, the idea that a state's foreign policy is driven purely by its national self-interest and survival. Roman warfare, too, with its emphasis on discipline, courage, organization. It certainly still resonates in how we think about strategy and power today.
And what's equally powerful in the sources you've shared is how ancient wars reveal that deep, sometimes uncomfortable connection between the individual and the community. The idea that a citizen might be treated as defeated combatants by their own state structures, or that Republican heroes would sacrifice personal interests for the Republic, it starkly illustrates how social context shapes individual autonomy and duty.
It really does. And the Roman historian Sallust pointed out how war inextricably links the domestic and international spheres. Rome's war on terror against the Numidians, for instance, relied on a solid home front. But even there, some citizens feared for their freedom while others grieved for the empire. It shows that constant interplay between internal stability and external conflict.
It's never just over there.
Never. Your sources highlight that war is simultaneously the supreme individual experience facing a lonely death and a deeply collective one, demanding total solidarity. Whether you're talking about ancient phalanxes or modern platoons, John Keegan's The Face of Battle, cited in your material, powerfully demonstrates that warriors often ultimately fight for their mates, their comrades right beside them, not necessarily some abstract higher purpose.
That makes sense. That immediate bond.
And this connects directly to Clausewitz's famous dictum. War is politics by other means. This isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a foundational insight. It suggests war is often a normal activity, not some aberration, embedded within a basic societal code and serving political objectives.
And the concept of honor also remains a driving force across time, doesn't it? As Lebeau summarizes, ancient societies' motivations were driven by fear, interest, honor, and habit.
Exactly. Warrior codes are deeply embedded in military and social establishments across history in diverse regions. The relentless pursuit of virtus, that Roman concept of manliness, courage, excellence, helps explain why Rome was constantly at war. Its very existence was intertwined with its understanding of warfare.
What stands out to me here, from your sources, is how writers about Rome often use it as a mirror to talk about their own time. You mentioned Mommsen warning against German militarism or Gibbon drawing parallels with British indiscipline.
That's a key point about studying history, isn't it? Interpretation is often shaped by contemporary concerns.
It brings to mind the Caledonian chieftain Kogakis's famously chilling summary of Roman success. They make a solitude and call it peace, a powerful reminder. Okay, shifting gears from ancient wisdom, let's move into modern warfare, say roughly 1600 to 1900. Your sources show us that the political, social, and economic drivers of change were already present then, but they accelerated dramatically. You have the rise of states, new economic forces, the emergence of the political mass. Big events like the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the Great Revolutions in France, Russia, China, they all profoundly reshaped humanity's relationship to God, to knowledge, ultimately leading towards popular sovereignty.
This period is indeed when the modern nation-state truly emerged as the dominant actor on the world stage. As Michael Howard famously stated, the origins of Europe were hammered out on the anvil of war, a really vivid image of conflict shaping identity.
It is.
And the sociologist Charles Tilly coined that often-quoted phrase, war made states and vice versa. It's a powerful insight into this symbiotic relationship. States develop institutions for war, and war in turn strengthens and defines states.
Even naval power, like in Britain's story, was tied up with state building and national identity, right?
Inextricably linked, yes.
What's also highlighted in your sources is this perceived civilization of war, particularly in the 19th century. The rise of just war rules. Alfred da Vinci in 1835 could even claim war has become civilized. Seems optimistic now.
Highly optimistic looking back. But the idea was that developing and applying the law of war could tame it. Concepts like jus ad bellum, the right to go to war, and jus in bello, conduct within war, were codified. And these principles aimed to limit war's impact across different traditions: Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh.
So an attempt to put rules around it.
An attempt, yes. But this attempt at civilizing war leads us straight to Carl von Clausewitz, a truly foundational figure in your sources. He's the great chronicler of the modern state's way of war. His unfinished masterpiece, On War, highlights the critical civil-military relationship, the role of generalship, and crucially the role of chance, what he called friction.
Friction, not like rubbing hands together, though.
No, friction. He described it as the force that makes the apparently easy so difficult. It's the countless small, unpredictable obstacles that just crop up in conflict: bad weather, bad intel, orders misunderstood, fear, exhaustion, things that derail the most meticulous plans.
The fog of war, essentially.
That's part of it, yes. For Clausewitz, war is a living, reacting force, not a machine. And he believed, famously, that the introduction of the principle of moderation in the philosophy of war is an absurdity. He saw war as having this potential to utterly destroy societies unless peace could be achieved through decisive victory or accepted defeat.
So despite all the planning, all the rules, there's this huge unpredictability. That friction. Colin Gray, another scholar in your sources, points out how elusive decisive victory often is. He notes how states that looked unassailable, like Rome or Nazi Germany, were ultimately destroyed by their own hubris, their own overreach.
Which raises that critical question your sources pose. Can war ever truly be successful without a realistic, achievable political goal? If the aims are unlimited or based on flawed assumptions, friction and folly can lead to ruin.
It highlights that the nature of war maybe the tools change, but that core element of human unpredictability and potential for folly, that seems constant. Now, the term total war, it's often used to describe the era since 1914, suggesting this fundamental shift where civilians are no longer off limits, casualties just skyrocket.
Right.
Technology supposedly makes courage and honor irrelevant.
Right, that's the common narrative. But your sources actually challenge this simplistic view a bit. They argued advanced armies have always had technological advantages, and civilian suffering, as we discussed earlier with ancient and early modern examples, wasn't exactly new.
But World War I, that does feel different, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. World War I truly stands out as transformative. It was the first truly global war. Machines arguably became more important than manpower in a way not seen before. Trenches, machine guns, poison gas. It also profoundly changed how public opinion mattered both during the war and in shaping the peace afterwards. It really gave rise to the discipline of international relations as we know it.
Because people needed to understand how that happened.
Precisely. Thinkers like Keynes and Hayek, political figures like Lenin and Hitler, they all drew profound, often totally opposing conclusions from the crucible of World War I. It even boosted interests like feminism, as Helena Swanwick's 1915 statement highlights, talking about women's solitary, horrific experiences back home while men fought. The impact was society-wide.
And the collective memory of World War I has had such a lasting effect, hasn't it? Particularly through literature. Remarks All Quiet on the Western Front, Sassoon's memoirs, both mentioned in your sources, they fueled this widespread revulsion against war.
They absolutely did. And Paul Fussel's The Great War and Modern Memory further cemented this narrative. He makes a devastating case against the generals, citing a lack of imagination, a rigid class system contributing to the slaughter. It paints this picture of utter senselessness.
A powerful, enduring image.
Yet your sources show this narrative isn't universally accepted. You have figures like Ernst Jünger, a decorated German stormtrooper, who found war uplifting and renewing. A very different perspective. Niall Ferguson's The Pity of War even challenged the whole evil of war myth, noting some soldiers felt liberated, found intense comradeship. And there's been spirited defense of generals like Haig, arguing the context was impossible.
So complexity even in the memory.
Definitely. What's chilling, though, and directly relevant to total war is that concept of Schrecklichkeit, frightfulness, developed by the German High Command back in 1902. It explicitly allowed for destroying the collective intellectual and material resources of the enemy, including towns and villages.
So it was planned, theorized even.
It was a calculated embrace of targeting the civilian sphere to break enemy morale.
And this logic of Schrecklichkeit, it really came into its own in battles like the Somme, Verdun, though its roots, as your sources note, were visible earlier American Civil War, Franco-Prussian War.
Yes, those earlier conflicts showed elements of it, but WWI scaled it up horrifically. Then you get Prime Minister Baldwin in 1932 with that terrifying statement, "The bomber will always get through."
Meaning, defense is impossible.
Essentially. And his conclusion was stark. You have got to kill more women and children quicker than the enemy if you want to save yourselves. This logic led supposedly civilized nations to adopt these same policies of frightfulness via strategic bombing in World War II.
Which brings us to World War II.
Indeed. And World War II took horrors to, well, new depths. The systematic brutalization by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union is undisputed in your sources. Historians like Ian Kershaw describe Nazi Germany as a paradigm for the 20th century, reflecting unforeseen levels of state repression and violence, unprecedented cynicism in international relations, and the immensely destructive power of ideologies of racial superiority. The scale of planned destruction was truly something else.
And among these horrors, the Holocaust. The systematic extermination of Jewish, homosexual, and Roma populations. It stands as the most remarked upon atrocity. It's incredibly difficult to read in your sources about how little was done to prevent it.
It is. Allied inaction, the Catholic Church's passivity, countries like Switzerland and Britain refusing entry to Jewish refugees.
Even with intelligence knowing what was happening.
Yes, American and British intelligence had ample access to details of the SS Sonderkommando's butchery, but the overwhelming priority was ending the war quickly, a terrible calculus.
And the legacy of that.
Well, what's deeply significant from your sources is that the Holocaust's aftermath directly led to coining the term genocide as a unique crime against humanity. And it propelled the term human rights onto the global agenda, largely driven by figures like Eleanor Roosevelt.
A direct response to the failure to act.
You could say that. Then came the Cold War, a different kind of total war, ideological, cultural, global standoff. No direct fighting between the superpowers, thankfully.
But defined by mattered mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. That chilling doctrine ensuring annihilation for both sides prevented direct conflict. But they fought brutal proxy wars instead. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. Conflict remained pervasive, just in a different form.
So, as we reflect on this vast historical sweep, all these examples from your sources, what broad lessons can the history of war truly tell us for the future? Are current wars, like those in Iraq mentioned in the text, genuinely explainable by these historical lessons?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Your material notes, it's commonplace to read that such and such a war was inevitable, a theme Stoessinger calls haunting and pervasive.
That sense of fatalism.
Right. And while civilians have undeniably borne the brunt of suffering in modern conflicts, your sources constantly remind us atrocities have always gone hand in hand with military action. Jerusalem in 70 BCE, Constantinople in 1214 CE. It's a long, grim history. And while some argue for a truly postmodern war, now high-tech killing mixed with low-tech brutality, others, like Christopher Coker, contend we still operate with a very 19th century view of war.
Meaning?
Meaning a view that war definitively ends. He argues many conflicts since WWI are actually products of long-standing social conflicts that just flare up and dissipate, rather than having neat conclusions. The critical insight is we need to understand why people are fighting their wars, their specific context, not just impose our models.
Which brings us to that crucial, often frustrating, practical insight from your sources. The tendency for generals, analysts, policymakers to get ready to fight the last war.
Constantly. Projecting its lessons onto the next situation, often inappropriately. We see it repeatedly.
The lessons of Versailles supposedly shaping the lead-up to WWII, Munich leading to containment instead of appeasement.
Exactly. Famously, Anthony Eden comparing Nasser to Hitler, or Condoleezza Rice drawing parallels between Saddam Hussein and, well, pick your historical villain.
And the intervention examples. Somalia teaching non-intervention in civil wars, then Yugoslavia being seen through that lens initially. Now Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan provide the lessons for the next conflict. It feels like a cycle.
It often seems like one. What's particularly striking from your sources is the direct parallel drawn between, say, the difficulties the U.S.-led coalition faced in Iraq after 2003 and the British experience of occupation there after World War I. Vice Admiral Nunn detailed it back in 1932. Sir Jeremy Greenstock, Britain's UN ambassador in 2003, pointedly asked, "Is it too churlish to ask whether the leaders of a more modern administration might have profited from studying former experience?"
Ouch. A powerful indictment of forgetting or ignoring history.
It is.
And this circles back to that idea of inevitability we touched on. It's often claimed, for example, the Cold War was inevitable from the start.
But as some historians in your material argue, it wasn't really seen that way until around 1946. Before that, many in the U.S. thought harmonious cooperation with the Soviet Union was possible post-war.
So what feels inevitable in hindsight was far from certain at the time.
This is a critical point for anyone analyzing history. The analyst always runs the risk of reading history backwards, assuming that our current understanding was shared by people back then. Stoessinger argues powerfully that since mortals make decisions, everything about those decisions is contingent, motivated by fear, misperception, error, leading to unforeseen consequences. Human fallibility is key.
So patterns endure, but the specific unfolding is always human. So, as we look back at our deep dive today, plumbing the depths of this chapter, from ancient battlefields to the Cold War's nuclear standoff, we've seen war described in your sources as both this unchanging horror and paradoxically a profound catalyst for societal shifts. We've explored the enduring human motivations, honor, fear, interest, the evolving technologies, and that constant, often misguided temptation to apply past lessons rigidly to new, different conflicts.
Ultimately, the central paradox remains unresolved, doesn't it? While the tools, the scale, the global context of war certainly change over time, the underlying human elements seem to echo disturbingly through the centuries. That pursuit of honor, the grip of fear, the danger of misperception, the power of collective experience, and that perpetual problem of unfinished business. It's a complex tapestry of change and consistency.
Which leaves us with an important question for you, our listener, to consider. If, as your sources consistently highlight, war is fundamentally a learned social activity, what does that actually say about our collective capacity to unlearn it? Or, perhaps more optimistically, how can we truly learn to apply its lessons forward in a nuanced way, rather than perpetually being condemned, as the saying goes, to fight the last war?